This is the John Oakley Show podcast.
The Wonder Bra, that was invented. Well, was it invented by a Canadian? I mean, and I'm looking at the year this was patented. It's relatively recent, but tell me about the Wonder Bra.
Well, a great lady who was one of the seamstresses, I guess, Louise Poirier. She worked for a man named Moses Nadler, and he had a little lingerie shop in Quebec. And he actually bought the name from an American company, but they weren't making what we know today as the Wonder Bra. They just had the name. And it was her that came up with the famous design that's sold by the millions around the world. They called it Style 1300, the kind of dream lift push-up bra, as they called it. Never fails to get a great laugh at my presentations that I've been doing across the country at the museums when I pull that and a jock strap out of the bag and ask people if they know what they have in common. Usually they say, a lot of action at your local college campus, but I tell them, no, it's a Canadian invention.
I was going to say, when things are shape-shifting so rapidly these days, it might be worn by one and the same. Who knows? But listen.
This is true. It's true. Nothing wrong with that, though.
No, not at all. No, wouldn't get political at all. But on this Wonder Bra thing, the numbers are rather astounding. Actually, it's made the Guinness Book of Records, has it not?
Yep. Yes, it has. Yeah, it was recognized in 1996. And she got her patent on it back in, I think it was 1977, but they were making it way back late 60s sometime when they put it out on the market. So, she's done well with it. Another great Canadian success story that nobody knows about. I mean, there's so many names like that in my book that you could ask 100 Canadians, and once they get past, like you said, the insulin, the snowblower, and the telephone, they're lost for words. But there's over 200 other stories in the book. So.
Well, they are, and it's an inexhaustible resource here, which is why you're back on, and we have you on periodically just to uncover some of these gems. Now, you referenced the jock strap.
Another great invention.
Well, tell us about that.
Important one.
I would say, otherwise, a lot of people singing falsetto, but what happened? I mean, up until that time, I don't know what they were doing for, getting equipped. But,
protection? Yeah.
Well, yeah, because hockey was invented well before the jock strap, and you've got that documented in the book as well with pictures, no less. But tell us about the jock strap.
Well, a young man named Jack Cartilage, who worked for his dad's company, the Guelph Elastic Hosiery Company. Now, the original jock strap was actually invented before that for, funny enough, bicycle couriers in Boston, to drive their bikes along the cobbled streets without having things get out of place, or injured. But he figured this wasn't enough when you get into a contact sport like hockey. And, a lot of hockey players know right down in their bones that you need something a little stiffer to protect certain things. And so he was the one that put the hard cup in a jock strap, and that was back in 1927. And as most wives out there will be, no surprise to learn that it was 3 years later when we come up with the goalie mask to protect our heads. So
we had priorities.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, you referenced the goalie mask. It's in the book as well. So Tell us. I mean, the fable goes that Jacques Plante was the first one to trundle out and wear it in the NHL, because he got cut up pretty bad, I guess, in the late 50s. But you predate that somewhat.
That's right. Yeah, that's the kind of the legend that it was Jacques Plante, but it actually was quite a bit before that, over 20 years before, when Clint Benedict actually had a very serious incident in the goal crease, and so he actually came out with the mask, which was quite a bit different than even the Jacques Plante one that's famous, the one that doesn't seem to offer much protection. Clint Benedict's was really just a leather appendage that he put over his nose and part of his forehead. And, and then Jacques Plante went on to have his great confrontation with Tove Blake, and he said, "You're not wearing that in the game." And, Plante didn't wear it, and they lost, and he put it back on the next night. They won, and that was the end of the discussion because Plante said, "If I can't wear it, I'm not going out." And so Blake looked down the bench, and there was no backup goalie. So he didn't have a choice. It was either let him play with the mask or Toe was going to have to go in the net. So I guess that's why it became legendary. But it was actually Clint Benedict about 20 years before, another great Canadian that gave us a great story. And I go into a bit more detail in the book because some of these stories are just fascinating, the story behind the story.
Well, yeah, and I mean, there's another story or an appendage to that. If Jacques Plante had not come out with that goalie mask, I mean, think of the horror movies with the chainsaws and everything. They never would have existed. So there's always a turning point in history and consequences and things like that.
That's right, yes. What's his name from Friday the 13th? It'd be a whole other different movie, you know.
You got it. Mark Rector's with us, author of O Canada, Our Home and Inventive Land. This one I was fascinated with, too. I mean, we're really on the cutting edge of technology. The book is replete with all kinds of instances, but the first internet search engine was actually invented by a Canadian. Yeah, once again, most people don't know. Everybody thinks Al Gore invented the internet, which is, of course, not true. But actually, Tim Berners-Lee. But he had a lot of help with a fellow that worked with him, and it was Alan Emtage, who was a McGill University student. He actually set up and made the second connection to the internet in Canada at McGill University. It was the very first one in Eastern Canada. And he was getting tired of typing in these long strings of search codes trying to find files in the FTP archive. And so he just kind of automated it. And he just thought, what am I going to call this thing? And he was searching the archive. So he took out the V and called it Archie. And if anybody's been on the internet since the late 80s, which is really going back there, they might remember Archie and Veronica, the two cartoon character names for the very first internet search engines, you know, predating Google by quite some time. So, and Alan went on to also help set up the standards for, you know, when we type in a URL like am640.com or globalnews.com.ca, that standard was come up with, was invented by Alan Emtage and Tim Berners-Lee together. They worked on the Internet Engineering Task Force. So we had quite a hand in a lot of these things and just don't get the credit for it. So that's why I wrote the book. Well, yeah, and it does, I guess, it pays tribute to a lot of people who have gone perhaps less than noteworthy here in Canada because we tend not to celebrate our own as much as we ought to. Which is why it's a fascinating read, too. And a lot of times you're just saying, geez, I didn't know that. Canadian, really? You know, you talk about, too, when this was a search engine. I mean, you also have an inclusion in here, I guess, one of the first, or you were the first, a member of a team anyway, a college radio station to make contact with the International Space Station, weren't you? Tell us about that. Geez, I hate to toot my own horn as one of my good, close friends, one of the students there in that project, as he says. But yeah, it was them that should get the credit. They were the first college kids to build a communication system to NASA specifications, mind you. This wasn't just some store-bought walkie-talkie. It was a full comm system with a tracking gimbal that had to follow the International Space Station as it rocketed overhead at 400 kilometers an hour. And they came to me with this idea, and I thought, oh, geez, they're crazy. But I didn't want to spoil their dream. I thought, you got to encourage dreams. And I thought, well, if nothing else, let's see if we try and, start putting a system together. And I thought, this is going to take us years. And they came to me very early in the program. We worked away for 2 years of a lot of late nights, Friday nights in the lab. And we had to apply to NASA for a specific type of program where they allowed professional engineers to set up a radio system to talk to the space station, but no college students had ever done it with stuff they designed in their classroom. And so we applied, and I thought there's no way they're going to say yes. And lo and behold, on New Year's Eve 2008, I checked my email before I went out, and here's this flight plan from NASA, from nasa.gov, and I'm trying to read this and all this gibberish, and on it was, contact with Humber College, and I was just dumbfounded that they said yes, and I was even more dumbfounded that we managed to pull off a world's first that nobody had ever achieved like that. And the next morning, I remember one of the students emailed me, Patrick Nealon, and he said, 237,000 websites and Maclean's blankety blank magazine. We had a lot of attention from that. We were on every national newscast and space science show and Discovery Channel stuff, and it was just fantastic. But all thanks to those four amazing students, the greatest students any professor could ever ask for. Well, there you go, and a feather in the cap for, Humber College as well. Mark Rector, professor and author of O Canada, Our Home and inventive land. And so, I mean, against the backdrop of doing something that tracks the International Space Station, let's come back down to earth and talk finally about the P-less whistle. I mean, it's not of the same magnitude, but goodness knows it's really got its important role in the Canadian fabric. I mean, whether it's football or hockey or whatever, the P-less whistle, how'd that come about?
Well, you wouldn't want to be a referee in the middle of an Olympics, okay, the 76 Montreal Olympics. Picture this, in a stadium, you're the young amateur referee, you got 60,000 eyes on you, the whole world watching, and there's this major foul committed right, at the under the net, and he goes to blow the whistle and it jams, because that's what the P-type whistles would usually do right in the heat of the moment. And he panicked, and of course, he's like, "Oh my God, I can't have this happen again." And so out of that horrible fail that went around the world on television, he said, "I got to do something." And so he hired a designer and went to a little plastics company in Stony Creek, Ontario. 14 prototypes later, they had a P-less whistle that you blow on, and it always goes off no matter what. And it seems to be successful, because I believe it's every single major sports league in the world, including the Olympics, now uses Ron Foxcroft's Fox 40 P-less whistle. I mean, just a great Canadian story from, a guy in his garage kind of thing. We've had a lot of things like that happen, and there's a lot of those stories in the book, and he's made quite a success for himself. So I'm really happy to tell those kind of stories, because we just don't toot our own horn enough. That stuff gets lost, I guess.
Well, and it brings us full circle, too. I mean, as a whistle without balls, and we started by talking about the jock strap. So, I mean, in a way, it's symbolic, if you get my drift, Mark. I mean,
absolutely.
It's always right. We'll have to do it again real soon, because, as I say, we've just scratched the surface. There's all kinds of wonderful stories in here about Canadian inventions. Again, the book is "Oh Canada, Our Home and Inventive Land, Canadian Inventors' Inventions and Firsts in Technology and Industry." Again, if people wanted to follow up and get a book, it's at ProfessorMarkRector.com.
Thanks for listening to the John Oakley Show podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe for free at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your on-demand audio.